Hey guys, a question that I get asked fairly often, even to this day on my channel, is what's the best folder for everyday carry tasks and bushcraft tasks? The answer to that is quite simple and straightforward: OpenL. Price performance, you can't beat them. They have a very comfortable handle. It's wooden, you can adapt it, you can even put a pocket clip on them. They have a locking mechanism. They have a thin stock, a thin grind, low edge angle. Whether you get the carbon steel version or the stainless steel version, the heat treatment is fairly good, and they have good edge retention. Easy to sharpen, weigh next to nothing. But I do understand the fact that some people don't like OpenLs because of the way they look. There's nothing special about them, except for the fact that when it comes to cutting, few knives do as well as them. But if you don't like the way your tools, your gear looks, you're not going to use it. So I'm going to talk to you about this knife, the Cold Steel Finwolf. I've been looking around for this knife for a long time, and finally 3-4 months ago I decided to get it. I like cold steel knives. Every cold steel folder that I get, a new model, they always impress me in some way. Now with this one, first thing I did was remove the thumb studs. Why? Because if you decide to drop the edge angle a bit more, they're going to get in the way of sharpening. But that was not the main reason. The main reason was when you cut with it, the way I cut, I choke up on the blade, and I like to use this first portion here because I have the most control. Doing feather sticks, your wood is going to, the slivers of wood you make, they're going to hit towards where the thumb stud was, and you're going to break them off. Cutting thick cardboard, same. The cardboard is going to hang in the thumb studs. So I decided to remove them. I don't need to deploy it one-handed, and now you can still deploy it one-handed, but I would suggest that you do it two-handed if you remove the thumb studs, and closing it also is best done two-handed. I say this because this knife did close on my hand, and it gave me a fairly nasty cut. You see the spring right here, it holds the blade open, but as soon as you go a bit below that, it'll snap shut with quite some force. So move your fingers out of the way, close it safely. I thought it was worth mentioning because it was a day much like this one, a bit colder, air was a bit drier, I was a bit more tired, and it cut me. Cold steel knives, folders especially, are not very fidget friendly. I have another Scandi Ground folder which I like, the Enzo Burke. It's a great folder for bushcraft stuff, does excellent. I like it because one of my favorite models is the Trapper, a fixed blade, and this one is rather similar to that. It's also in D2. Brisa's heat treatment of D2 I think is very good. But this one is not so fidget friendly. I have no problems with that because with cold steel folders, mostly you get the triad lock. And while I have my reservations towards backlock knives, I do like cold steel's triad lock. Whenever I cut into hard materials, hard wood, and I put a lot of pressure behind the cut, the blade will push on the locking mechanism, and that one will move in my hand, making the knife feel less stable. There's some movement there which I just don't like. It doesn't happen with triad locks. Now, because it's a triad lock also, this one has a fairly stiff spring. So whenever you're closing it, even like I said, if you can do it one-handed, be careful that you put your finger right up here. If you put it lower on the handle, you might get cut. You have to use considerable force. So I will sometimes do this to close it. They're not toys. They're tools for working, and I like that about cold steel. Some people would like them to be more fidget friendly. I've seen people who modify the spring to have less tension there. Personally, even with the American Lawman, which is the stiffest triad lock I own, I like the fact that it's that stiff. I like the fact that it's a tool. And this one, just like that, it's a tool. Now, the blade shape, this would be a very good bushcraft blade shape. You have the tip, which is fairly sharp, not as rounded as with the Mora Garber, for example. You can dig into wood with this tip. You can make a hole. It won't jump out as quickly. And don't do this. Put it on a flat surface, know exactly what you're doing, but you can work with this tip. The steel, AUS 8A. AUS 8 is a softer steel. I have no idea what the difference between 8 and 8A is. But this one came with me with a very sharp edge, as do all cold steel folders, at least the ones that I bought. And I have not sharpened that edge prior to working with it. The first thing that I cut was dry acacia wood and then some dry dogwood. And I did get some rolls in the edge. I remedied that pretty quickly with my DC4 sharpening stone and a small strop. And since then, I've only been doing that. I've only been doing small sharpening jobs, maintenance sharpening. Now, this knife, I don't think it can. The tip might take off some hair, but the main part, only if you push a bit harder. You don't need a shaving sharp edge to work wood with. If it slices a piece of paper cleanly, you're golden. You don't need more than that to work wood. The Scandi ground blades, in my opinion, are very good for beginners, especially if you're practicing your fire making. This one does not have the sharpest of spines. You could probably easily remedy that so you can strike a ferro rod with it, or you can just use a striker, whichever you prefer. But for making feather sticks, 2-bevel ground knives, Scandi ground knives, are perfect because you just need to lay it flat on the relatively straight piece of wood and then tilt it. You don't have to look for that edge like you would look for a full flat ground blade which has a larger or smaller edge. You need to do a bit more fidgeting there. Here you just put it flat and then you tilt it, and even in this position, working for the camera, I can cut some relatively fine shavings. If I were to split this piece of wood, I'd be able to cut them much better. Now, I did round off all the edges here. After I took the thumb studs off, disassembled the knife, and with the file from my Leatherman, I rounded off all the edges because they were sharp. That took me about 5 minutes. In the forward grip, the hammer grip, this is very comfortable. You can put a lot of force behind the cut, push cut, or just a slice cut, where you hold your hand in this angle to what you're cutting, so you will slice more, and you can use it perfectly because of this low edge angle. Removing material goes very quickly. One grip which you might be using if you're doing small carving tasks, you want to put a radius into something, is this. And it's not as dangerous if you know what you're doing. If you don't, then don't go with the tip towards yourself. Hold the blade like this and you will stop before hitting yourself right here. And also in this position, it's very comfortable. Now, one position that I have a problem with this knife is the chest lever grip. This is a power grip. You want to put a point on a stick real quickly. Maybe you don't have that much space to work in, a lot of brush or people. You're going to use your back muscles, hold the knife like this, and you can remove fairly huge chips of wood using this grip. And if you just want to put a point on a stick, you can see it goes very quickly. It doesn't tire you out because you're using your back muscles. However, the butt of the knife does dig into my hand. If you're using gloves, it's not going to be that big of a deal. If you have smaller hands, it might be comfortable. But if you have bigger hands, then it's going to be very uncomfortable, especially if you're doing hard cuts, hard power cuts. Now, you can use the chest lever grip to do controlled cuts, to just shave small pieces of wood to light your fire with. Here you're not going to have any issues because you're going to hold the knife like this. But for power cuts, this might give you some problems. I don't think that's a huge issue. This is a very, very sturdy tool. Now, I prefer to have everyday carry folders which I can use for woodworking. And what I like to do is thin out the grind, reduce the edge angle. And with this, I can work wood much better than with this. It has a lower edge angle right now, and the thickness behind the edge is smaller. So this works wood much better than that. However, if you do this, if you thin out the grind, lower the edge angle, as soon as you encounter knots in something like this is dogwood, dried on the forest floor, rained upon, dried again, it's gonna be fairly tricky. Wood which you dry at your cabin, straight grained wood, neatly dried, it's not gonna be as easy, is gonna be more easy to work with than this one that you find out here. Doing feather sticks on wood like that, way easier, especially if you find straight grained wood. But here, when you get to dogwood, for example, you're gonna have knots. And if I were to do with the other knife, what I'm just gonna show you now, I'd get to a knot and I'm gonna lift and break out parts of that knot. This blade will probably get a roll, will probably warp slightly. This, not so much. There's a lot of metal behind this. This is why 2-bevel ground knives, Scandi ground knives are great for woodworking. And because this is a triad lock, you can also split some sticks with it. Now, I wouldn't go all out and baton it. I would do that gradually, test it. Be sure to be safe. However, of all the tests that I did with my cold steel folders, I batoned them, and I haven't had one issue with them. No blade play, no problems with the locking mechanism. Everything was fine. This is because they are, well, slightly or more overbuilt, but they are tools. I like this knife. The fact that it gives me some issues in the chest lever grip, it's not the biggest problem for me. I keep this in my backpack. I use it for little else than working wood out here. My Burke, I don't keep in my backpack because I don't want to lose it or have it stolen if somebody gets my backpack from my car. But this, I have no issues with it. I think that considering the price for which you can purchase a tool is very important. If you have a tool which is slightly more expensive and you very much like, you're probably never going to find out the limits of that tool. You're probably not going to put it through everything. I have no issues in working with this one, no matter what kind of wood I'm carving, cutting, shaving, if it's dirty or whatever. And if I have to baton a piece of wood, and let's say I don't have my axe or my big knife with me and I have just this small piece of wood to split to start a fire, I have no issues in using something like this. If it wouldn't be a triad lock, I would think twice before batoning a back lock, a liner lock, frame lock knife. Axis lock knives I like, and I think they are, well, for me at least, on par with the triad locks when it comes to abuse, but these are much safer. However, like I said, opening and closing this knife in particular, best done two-handed. One thing I like with cold steel knives folders, they decided not to use metal liners. I don't mind if a knife is too heavy, if a folder gets to be too heavy. Some people do. This is done to reduce weight, probably also cost, and it just works with G10 handled models, as well as with this, I don't know if it's Grivery or FRN, whatever they call it, plastic. Better, more resistant plastic, but it's still plastic. Does it flex? Sure, a bit. It does flex a bit. I don't feel it in my hand. Wherever I cut with it, I can't say that I feel it. And even if it does not have a void end, because it's a triad lock, no matter how hard I squeeze it, I don't get that blade play, that up and down blade play, which I get, for example, with the Spyderco Siren, which bothers me. Might not bother you, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Great tools. The steel for me is sufficient. If you're looking for something with a better steel, yeah, sure, go look into the Enzo Burke. It's a great folder. They also have the full flat ground version. For the Finwolf, I'm probably going to reduce the edge angle a bit, and I assume that after I sharpen it completely, once or twice, I'm not going to get these small rolls. This is the factory edge, and usually the factory edges are less resistant than an edge which you will put on by yourself, just using regular stones, not a grinder or something else. Depends on your level of knowledge. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments about the cold steel Finwolf, let me know in the comment section. I'll try to get to them as soon as possible. If you have any other suggestions for bushcraft folders, I would be interested. For me, like I said, I like to modify knives and I like to use them for whatever possible. And when it comes to cold steel, pretty much every folder that I got from Cold Steel, I was very, very impressed. Thanks for watching, guys. And as always, I wish you all a great day.